As summer draws to a close, I find myself once again paralysed by choice when it comes to the games I want to play. Between the Steam summer sale, a weird hyperfixation on one particular franchise that may or may not be the subject of a future video, and a general curiosity about a slew of new titles that I bought and barely played, if at all, I found myself at a bit of a crossroads and in desperate need of a palate cleanser. I suspect many of you do too, which is why I'm so enamoured by the enormous array of short, free games we have access to these days. Something you can download at no cost to yourself beyond the tithes you pay to your internet service provider, invest a small amount of time into, and occasionally come out of with significant, satisfying impact. Having said that, as with premium products, it's hard to separate the wheat from the chaff, especially with so many games coming out every single day. They aren't all winners, and even if we're being charitable, they aren't always going to be for you, which is where folk like me come in, here to offer you a curated list of oddities, experiences with staying power, and maybe something in here that you'll latch onto and come to love as much as I did. Without further ado, here are 9 games I think are worth your time that you can play right now for free. In this short interactive experience, you play as Dodd and you go to a museum. So far, so good. Trading standards would be happy. Dodd is a nice, friendly person, as we should all aspire to be, and so, inevitably, like all nice, friendly people, you get roped into doing something that isn't really your job, becoming the museum's janitor for the day, collecting rubbish, shepherding insects, helping patrons. There's a lot to do, but it's no great toil, and it doesn't stop you from enjoying the fruits of artistic endeavour, entomological study, or being able to take a moment to stop and gaze at the stars. Dodd Goes to the Museum is not long, nor is it challenging. What it is, however, is memorable, an experience that utilises its brevity to snap straight to the meaningful, the thought-provoking, and the poetic. As much as I was simply down for pottering about a dusty old museum as an anthropomorphic crocodile dude, at least I think that's what Dodd is, what I got from the game ended up sticking with me long after I reached its narrative conclusion. I say narrative conclusion as the game doesn't really end. You have to access the credits from the main menu, and you return to the main menu by physically leaving through the front door. There's something in that, I think. It leaves the onus on you to decide when you're done. That's one of the great strengths of this medium, I think, and in a way it makes this one of the more immersive museum sims out there. Sometimes we get too bogged down in the idea of game mechanics and design and forget to enjoy the actual beauty of works like these, which is getting a glimpse into how someone else sees the world, what they think is important. I think Dodd Goes to the Museum is the apex of this way of thinking, an experience that ended up being way, way more than the sum of its parts. Running on a high after playing through this again for this video, I picked up developer Schweg's other game listed on Steam, Pengu Never Left. It's less than £2 and is disarmingly poignant. I will be playing everything else this developer releases moving forward. In 2024, developer Coalsupper released a game called Thank Goodness You're Here, a bawdy, inventive and very funny adventure game that, although probably not for everyone, definitely struck a tone with me. It was one of my Christmas games, and I had a great time poking around its lovingly rendered town to see what made it tick. The Good Time Garden is Coalsupper's previous title. Something that feels like a prototype for the sort of tone and personality of that larger sophomore offering. In it you are tasked with feeding an assortment of items, both living and inert, to this thing. I'm not sure what it is, but it has a face, and that face is creepy. Entirely wordless, you intuit what is needed from environmental cues, as well as the limited pool of interactions your character has with the world around them, and things become increasingly weird. While a lot of the humour of Thank Goodness You're Here was a matter of taste and perspective, something that game did really well was hosting this incredibly macabre undertone that gave the whole experience a low-key horror vibe. Increasingly it felt like there was something wrong with this town, and not just because of, well, everything on screen at any given time. This isn't a video about that game, but I did find myself thinking about this specific aspect of it while I played The Good Time Garden. A bastion of body horror, things that seem silly at first glance, but when you think about them even for a second, the implications become too much to pass. This is all held together by this impressively characterful art style. It feels distinct and purposeful. At some point down the line, you're going to take a glance at a screenshot like this and intuit that's a Coal Supper game. And I think beyond anything else, that's a real achievement. Mechanically, the game is a bit simple, and it's sadly over before it gets a chance to get properly interesting, but as a free offering from a studio that has gone on to prove its chops, I think this is a really fascinating little thing. I also think Thank Goodness You're Here is a very worthy investment should you like what you find in this short experience. At £16, it's ever so slightly outside of the remit of the kinds of games I feature in these collections, but it is a good price. And to be honest, given that how AAA games are now 80 fucking quid for some reason, it's time to have a good think about what a work of interactive art is worth to us. If I have to start doing cool games for 20 quid, so be it. Doesn't quite roll off the tongue the same way, but hey, at least good folk will be getting paid.
Where are we going?
Sometimes something catches your eye on your Steam recommendations page. Sometimes it's a striking bit of key art or a catchy title. Sometimes it's Cum Rooms, a sexy exploration game about no-clipping into rooms full of hot monster girls and trying to survive. I have to admit, I do get a kick out of finding these horrible adults-only games, even if a lot of them are stinking up the joint. Sometimes it's just a bewilderment that something that looks so solid and polished is being handed out to the ungrateful public for free. The New Flesh is astonishing in this regard. A game featuring some genuinely impressive visual flair, a brilliant soundtrack from the indie rock band Red Vox, and a mind-bending exploration of a single contained location. It's part off-peak, part Videodrome, a blend of cool punk rock stylings and gluttonous body horror. Again, on a mechanical level, this is more of an experience than a capital G game. You go out, find 3 MacGuffins, in this case videotapes, bring them back to the creepy dude with a hole in his chest, move on. It's not taxing, but this was essentially also the case with Off-Peak, a game I absolutely adore. Sometimes the vibes can carry the whole thing, like with Cum Rooms. I'm going to shut up about that one now. I'm a bit at odds with how to approach The New Flesh from a critical perspective because I'm not entirely sure what it is. A demo reel of sorts, at times it feels like a vertical slice for a much more substantial offering down the line. At other points I see within it the sort of interactive album stylings of Simogo's Sayonara Wild Hearts or the woefully underrated Asterism. Look forward to more words on that latter title in my Game of the Year video. Whatever The New Flesh is, it's very cool and it's very free. A playthrough will last you less than an hour, and that will end up being a very special hour indeed. Of all the games in this collection, this is the most staggeringly generous. As its name suggests, this is a top-down adventure game in the vein of Zelda in a crisp 1-bit style, evoking the likes of Master Key and Minute, albeit without any form of combat. Instead, a series of item hunts and fetch quests. It's actually more engaging than I'm explaining it here, you'll have to trust me on that. 1-Bit Explorer is a quintessential indie game, really cute, engaging short experience with a world that feels great to navigate. I was simply content to potter about this world, collecting what was needed and reaching that conclusion within a single session. Perfect post-dinner evening fodder to be celebrated in that regard, especially at the bumper price of £0 sterling. I would have paid a fiver for it even in this basic iteration of the idea, but that's only the tip of the iceberg. It's hard at first to reconcile the true scope of this project because, as it turns out, it's lying to you. This isn't some grand adventure. You do not save the world. The world does not need saving. That's what it tells you. That's the full extent of the Steam description, and of course, given what we know about games as an interactive medium, why would anyone question that? 1-Bit Explorer is a game that tricks you into thinking that it's much smaller than it actually is. Starting out with a modest goal, collecting 3 MacGuffins, you can do just that, reach the credits and be satisfied with this cute, no-cost little experience. In that initial loop, there's still plenty to experience through that. But this is not what the game is, not in its totality. The first victory condition, as it turns out, is a fail state, as the credits will tell you, and what emerges from there is an experience that is rich in value and full of really smart bits of game design. This is incredibly impressive as a bait and switch, but I've already probably said too much. This is something to go into as blind as possible, the great joy of the experience coming from that discovery of what the game actually is. Developer Fiddleling, horrible name I'm afraid, sorry, has also released 2-Bit Explorer, which can be found on their itch page, and is in the process of developing 3-Bit Explorer. This is definitely a creator worth keeping an eye on. On the opposite end of the spectrum, this, well, it's barely a game really, more a showcase of art, animation and pacing. You move through a war-scarred land, observing the world that once was as you make your way to honour a sacred oath. Impressively gorgeous, The Last Oath is an experience held together by a strong art direction and a world that feels bigger than it actually is. There's a surprising sense of scale to be found here, the intimacy of the ground beneath you and the world upended and desecrated, juxtaposed with the towering monument to regal excess found at the conclusion of your journey. The body of the experience won't take more than 10 minutes to engage with, but like a lot of the games in this list, it struck a chord with me. I found it worming its way into my thoughts long after it ended. What is it in aid of? I don't know. As the precursor to something bigger, I can see the vision, and yet sometimes works like these simply exist to be. The bliss of The Last Oath is its brevity, the frugal nature of its narrative, the evocative imagery of its world. Maybe we don't need to see more. It's hard to put this point across without sounding patronising, but I've always loved when you can tell a game was made by a solo developer, especially one with eyes bigger than their stomach. I value ambition as a petard to be hoisted by. There's something deliciously earnest about projects of this calibre. Often is the case that what results is something where so easily you can see the vision and the execution is not that far off the quality of the works that inspired it. Szikra is, or however you pronounce it, is one such project. A side-scrolling puzzle platform adventure full of striking imagery, surprising variation and a really evocative art style. Inspired in part by the paintings of Hungarian artist Anita Toth, sorry about the pronunciation, which are featured directly within. This is a low-stakes, whimsical journey across an unusual landscape, navigating dense forests and machine-laden factories in pursuit of a captured loved one. Dark fantasy with steampunk touches, a rather engaging little experience that felt part and parcel with works like Inside and Planet of Lana. It's a classic running, jumping, crate-pulling jape. The controls, they take a little bit of getting used to thanks to how acrobatic the player character is. There's definitely room for a bit more polish within, but the game does a good job of understanding its own constraints, presenting the player with a challenge that is moderate but cerebral and making good use of both its art and sound design to guide you through its surprisingly lavish world. This is a low-key banger. I'm glad it caught my eye while scrolling through the recommendations on Steam, because works like these are the ones that I love to champion. Someone has given this time, energy and thought, and in the process gifted us an incredibly charming, vibesy little game. Generous is too frugal a word to describe this. Szikra is free to play, but there is an option to purchase the soundtrack on Steam if you would like to support the developer. Deep in the dead of night, something wicked lies in wait. A doctor, newly arriving at a clinic from which your predecessor had met an untimely end. An illness washing through the town. There are patients to see, more patients than you can actually treat in a given day. How you make your choice is up to you, but know that every action has a consequence. Triage is a short adventure game created over the course of a year as an academic project for Champlain College. In it, you interact with, treat, and attempt to save 3 patients at a clinic with a dark secret. It's a straightforward case of listening to your patients, identifying their symptoms, and then consulting your apothecary's journal to mix the right herbs to create medicine that might help keep their illness at bay. The process is straightforward. The choice you have to make is far from. You do not have enough resources to treat everyone every day, and leaving conditions untended inevitably leads to them getting worse. The thing is, the more you engage with your patients, the harder it becomes to know what the right course of action is. For such a short, sharp experience, this central moral dilemma is an interesting foil, particularly for me because this kind of decision-making is something I'm party to in my day job. I don't have to do it myself, I'm just the dude who yells at the doctors for not prescribing things correctly, but it's been fascinating understanding the process by which medical professionals make decisions about patient care. It's less alarming at the hospital I work at than what we find here, obviously, because we have better resources, even if there is understandably room for improvement, but the principles remain the same. And that constraint does pose an interesting question about whether healthcare in a crisis should have moral, political, or even utilitarian considerations. Do you save the journalist, even if their symptoms are less severe, simply because it might allow more people to get help in the future? Do you treat the huntsman at all because he seems awfully suspicious and aggressive? Do you deal at all with whatever is going on behind that locked door on the first floor? A cool game. Something I think could be expanded out into a bigger project should the desire and, more importantly, capital arise. But for a short, free experience, this is a quality find. There are no options for remuneration for this project as far as I can see, but obviously I'm curious to see if these students end up working on commercial games in the future. The Children of the Clay is a point-and-click adventure game with some of the creepiest visuals I've ever seen in an interactive experience. It makes my skin crawl. Obviously, this is a brilliantly enticing prospect for any budding horror fan. That's not me, by the way. I don't really like horror games, and yet, when this title cropped up in my recommendations, I couldn't help but be curious. This is one of the shorter experiences in this collection. Likely it will only take around 15 minutes to reach its conclusion, but like some of the other games, this is something that has stayed with me long after I played it. The premise is that you are investigating an eerie artifact to uncover its dark secrets and get to the root of why it feels so haunted. Another game in this collection alongside Szikra that is inspired in part by Hungarian folklore, there's a brilliantly engaging sequence of uncovering markings, consulting your journal, rotating and prodding this absolutely hellish thing. The stop motion animation puts the whole experience together nicely, and as it progresses it gets increasingly unhinged. There's some stunning artwork to be found here. It's also a pleasantly tactile experience, all about dragging things around, looking through a magnifying glass, consulting your journals, which I think makes it all the more immersive for the medium used to animate it all. This has been an increasingly valuable addition in recent years, this push for different ways of how a game is made to look. Stop motion is a laborious endeavour that seldom gets rewarded, but it certainly makes some striking looking games, titles like Harold Halibut, Asterism, man I can't wait to talk more about that game, and the works of Jack King Spooner. At the time of writing, Machina just came out and it looks incredible. Like those other titles mentioned, The Children of the Clay looks and feels fantastic to play. My only gripe is that I wish there was more of it. Who knows? Maybe an expanded version of its ideas is on the way? There is a paid making of DLC available for this game should you wish to support its creator.
Hope you don't mind, but could you tell me where the hell is the boss?
Okay, buckle up. This one is absolutely fucking wild. Honestly, just go play this and come back to me because you will not believe the production quality of this game considering that the team behind it are not charging anything. I mean, there's a supporters pack available for less than a tenner that has some behind the scenes stuff, but before you even open your wallet, there's a good couple of hours of incredible, varied and wonderfully playful game to be found here. I should caveat that this is only part one of a planned episodic endeavour. The future episodes will be paid for. But honestly, even as a way to get people through the door, it's a wonderful treat to be party to something like this. For further context, Ina is a multimedia project by the Peruvian animation studio Ina Team. I've not yet engaged with any other part of this venture, but I was made aware of it through the grapevine by a lot of people on Blue Sky excitedly posting about the release of this game earlier this year. And it sells itself on sight alone, a bright and avant-garde mishmash of animation styles, tonally inconsistent, and yet at the same time feeling beautifully holistic. This game is what the kids would call so extra. An experience full of wonderfully unnecessary visual flourishes, an astonishingly good voice cast, a world that is creative and exciting to explore, and it all keeps going and going and going. It's going to be a challenge to categorize Dream Barbecue, as it exists as part of a much bigger ensemble project. In a way, even though this is an interactive experience, and by that definition a game, does it necessarily fit within the same framework? Can it be judged on its merits in isolation? Yeah, of course. This might even go on my end of the year list. Get it played. One of the pitfalls of having to discover new games online is that it's often quite hard to recognise what makes something special from a simple glance at a store page or a handful of screenshots. There are titles on here that I wouldn't necessarily have looked at twice under normal circumstances, and many more that I played in preparation for this video that didn't make the cut simply because they weren't all that interesting to me. No shade, obviously. Sometimes it's just like that. I know, however, that I have enough material to make at least another half dozen of these videos. Even in the process of writing this particular script, I snagged a load of new titles that look really great, but that I just need the time to properly unpack. Whether they are proof of concept, an educational tool, student project, or other non-commercial work, or simply something someone made that they wanted to share with as many people as possible, I am astonished by the breadth of ideas on offer here. One of the things I wanted to do with this volume of Cool Games for Free was also highlight that there are often ways of financially supporting the developers of these games, even if the initial work doesn't ask to be remunerated. Often something offered for free on Steam will also have a pay-what-you-want option for its version on itch. Sometimes there's a bit of bonus DLC that acts as a tip jar of sorts, or even other premium titles from that same creator to invest in. The point of this video is not to take and take and take, but to inform, educate, and spread the love for these weird and wonderful artworks that you can experience for free, and then, perhaps, I could gently encourage you to pay for them anyway. Stay tuned for more of these because they're a lot of fun to make and also quite easy to edit. That's content, baby!